Well, good morning and welcome to another episode of JP's Misadventures. I haven't really thought about what story I'm going to do today. Uh, I'm having to run to my mom's house to help her with a few little items, and I figured I would tell a story on my way. Anyway, I know a good one. I've had my driver's license for quite some time. In the state of Mississippi, they allow you to get your driver's license at 15 if you've had driver's ed. And of course, I did the whole course and everything, passed flying colors because I'd actually been driving for probably, at least 5 years before that. Um, when I lived with my father in the travel trailer there in Vicksburg, at least once a month, we would drive from Vicksburg, Mississippi up to Arkansas so that I could visit my mother and stay for the weekend. And a lot of times when we left, when he got there at 5 o'clock on Friday afternoon, I'd have everything packed and I'd put it in the car and everything. And we'd jump in the car and I'm the one who drove. Dad, pretty much slept. Of course, I knew the way and everything. And so I've been driving for quite some time. Well, when I turned 15 and got my driver's license, it wasn't too much longer after that something happened at home and I got really upset. I was the only one there after that because I pretty much got left behind because of my misbehavior or whatever it was that my stepmother thought I had done. And I decided I was going to run away. So here I am, 15. I've got a 1973 Chevrolet Monte Carlo with about 400 horsepower in it. And I just grabbed an armload of clothes and threw it in the back seat and jumped in. And of course, back then, you could fill one of those tanks, and I'm saying tank like big car, up for $20. And of course, I had my allowance and everything. So I took my little bit of money and took myself and off to the gas station I went, and I filled it up and headed for Little Rock, Arkansas from Vicksburg, Mississippi. Now, this is about a 2.5, well, really it's close to a 3-hour drive because back then it was all 2-lane pretty much the whole way from Vicksburg. But again, I knew every little town, every little turn, everything. And I hopped in the car and off I went. Well, it didn't take long for my dad to figure out exactly what I had done. And of course, he called my mother, told her, and told her to expect me. Of course, I didn't know any of this. I got to Little Rock. She's standing there waiting on me. Wanted to know what happened, and I told her everything. I stayed for the weekend. But then I had to go back. Didn't want to, but I had to. So I was driving back, and on that little 2-lane, about, 15 minutes, 20 minutes south of Pine Bluff, Arkansas, there's a prison unit there. There's Big Tucker, Little Tucker, and Cummins. And of course, if you've ever seen that old prison movie, God, forgive me, I don't remember the name of it. But if I remember right, it was Robert Redford came in, and he was the new warden and everything. That movie is loosely based on that particular prison. Pretty rough kind of place, Well, as you come to that little wide spot in the 2-lane, there are signs up everywhere. Don't pick up hitchhikers. And of course, I saw that sign. I saw it every other weekend, Jim. But I didn't really pay it much mind. Well, I got down there. Sure enough, here's this guy hitchhiking. He doesn't have much with him and everything. And so I pulled over for him. He walks up to the car, and I open the car door and everything, and ask him to open his coat, and I want to make sure, he's not carrying a gun or a big old knife or something. I asked him where he's going. He said, well, I'm going to Vicksburg, Mississippi. And I said, well, you're in luck, young man. Sorry, I'm headed the same way. I'm going to Vicksburg myself. Hop on in. And he did. And he says, you're kind of young to be driving a car out here by yourself, ain't you? I thought, well, I've got my driver's license, and I've been driving quite a few years. And I said, you wouldn't have to have any cash to throw in, the old saying, cash, grass, or ass. Anyway, he didn't have any of that. But he was a nice fella and everything. But he had just gotten out of prison and didn't have nobody, to come get him or anything. And we had a real good conversation. I drove him all the way down to Vicksburg and actually drove him right up to his mama's house. And she was just tickled to death to see him. Truly happy, not upset that he was there and she didn't know he was coming, kind of thing. But anyway, it just goes to show you, sometimes when you stop and help a stranger, they surprise you. Because it wasn't too much longer after that. I was in that same car and it broke down on me. And it wasn't really something broke. The lead came off the alternator. But I didn't have any tools or anything to put it back on. And of course, it'd been running off the battery, and the battery ran down on me. And it quit. And here I am on the side of the road out in the middle of BFE. And for y'all people who don't know our southern colloquialisms, that means bumfuck Egypt. That is out in the middle of absolutely nobody near you for 10 miles walking distance at least. But I've tried everything. I didn't have any tools in the car. I've tried to get it back on with my fingers. I had a little roll of tape, but not much, electrical tape. And I tried to tape it in position and everything. But, even when I got it on, I still didn't have a way to start the car because it's automatic. It's flat. It wasn't like I could push start an automatic. So I sat there. Well, it wasn't too much longer. Here come this old beat up Ford pickup truck. When I say old, I mean old. Like probably a 48, 49 F100. And it's puttering along on its old smoky 6-cylinder. And the guy pulls up. And of course, I didn't get a real good look at it because the sun was in my eyes. It looked like, one of these old farmers in his bib overalls, his cowboy hat and everything, these boots. And he comes walking there. He says, Jason. He says, what's wrong? And I turn around. I was like, Bob, how you been, my buddy? He says, really good. He says, what's going on? I said, well, apparently Dalton wire fell off. And, I've been running on battery. Well, the battery ran down. Now the car won't start. He said, would you get the alternator fixed? I said, well, no, not really. But I don't have any tools or anything. He says, nothing. He says, that's kind of unusual for you. I said, yeah, I know. But he had some tools and we fixed the alternator and he had some jumper cables. So we jumped it off and he helped me out, And he told me when he finished up, he says, he says, you're a little too trusting of people. You really need to watch out in your life for people taking advantage of you. But I'm real blessed that somebody like you came along when you did, because if you hadn't picked me up, he says, I'd probably be right back in prison. He says, I didn't know what I was going to do. I didn't know where I was going to go or how I was going to do it because, all I had was $20 in a account that I couldn't even access that they gave me, from the prison. And no bus ticket, nowhere to go, no job, no nothing. And he said, just out of the blue, here comes this kid who stopped, trusted me enough to let me in his car, and he took me all the way home to my mama's house. And there was a job there waiting for me, and I've been doing right and flying right ever since. He says, I don't want to go back to doing the things I was doing that ended me up in prison. And he says, you were a blessing. And he said, you're a little guardian angel that just happened to be there when I needed somebody. And that really touched me. And so it's one of those things that, I may not have any money in my pocket, but I'll give somebody the shirt off my back. They ask me for it. And I've always tried to pay it forward. And I'll tell you, that good karma, it comes back to you threefold because, bad comes back to you tenfold. But that good karma has paid off for me many, many times. And it just paid off for me again recently. As some of y'all know, I've got another channel called The Motored Mind, where I do little repairs and rebuild mostly small engines and stuff. I have a cousin of mine. She gave me a 15-year dead John Deere riding mower. And of course, I brought it home and I piddled with it a little bit. And I did manage to get it started. Of course, it didn't really run, but it did start. And it's going to need a lot of repairs before I can sell it. But when I do sell it, I should be able to sell it for about $2,000. But I don't have a buyer or anything, for it. Well, I owe somebody some money out, pest control company, but it's a small mom and pop kind of place. And I called the owner and I told him, I said, look, I said, this is not an excuse. It's just an explanation. I know I've got a 1-year contract with you, and I know I'm behind. I think I'm 2 months behind. He said, no, sir. He says, you're 5 months behind. And I apologized. And I told him, look, my husband, Steven's been out of work for 4 months out of this year. 2.5 of those was contiguous. And so it's been rather tough. We've been, having to rely on what I can make doing my little, side jobs and everything, hustling. That's what I do. I hustle everywhere I get a chance. I do. I said, but I want to pay you off in full, but it's going to have to wait. I just injured myself the day before yesterday. I tore a muscle in my calf pretty bad. I had to wear a boot when I walk. But, and that's kind of slowing me down on putting this mower back together. But when it's done, I'm going to sell it and I'm going to pay you off in full for the whole year. So you tell me I already owe for 5 months. I said, that should be what, about $220? He said, $219. You got a good memory. I said, well, you gave me a good price. I said, that's what I like about going with mom and pop places, is because they'll work with you. And I'm hoping you understand and you'll work with me on this. I know I'm behind. I said, but not only am I going to pay you what I owe you for the past 5 months, I said, I'm going to go ahead and pay off the contract. So that's going to be $420 total. I said, but I got to sell this riding mower first. And he asked about it, and I told him, and he says, well, I'm interested in a riding mower. He says, it's a John Deere? I said, yes, sir, it's a John Deere. He says, well, I'll tell you what, you get it all finished up and everything, and I'll buy it from you. I said, well, now hang on. If that's the case, why don't we just do a little barter here? I'll sell it to you for $1,580, and you just forgive the $420 I owe you. Or, if you got to show it on the books, because you are a business after all, go ahead and pay the $2,000 for it, and I will pay you the $420 out of that proceeds for my bill. And he said yes. And he said, no, he wouldn't do that for just anybody. And I believe him, But this young man, he impressed the hell out of me. He was going door to door back in March, selling his pest control company. And it just impressed me that here's this kid. He's out here, go-getter. I mean, knocking on people's doors, trying to sell something nowadays in 2025, really, at a pest control service. And he gave me his absolute rock bottom price of $40 a month. That's cheap for pest control. And they come, anytime I need something, they're Johnny on the spot. And of course, they come quarterly and everything, and they treat for everything. And of course, like I said, if you have any other issues or problems, all you just call them, and boy, they're there, Johnny on the spot, next day. Sometimes the same day if they got somebody in the area. Diamond Pest Control out of Conway, Arkansas, for y'all that live here in the Central Arkansas area. Look him up and call him. Ask for Clarence. He's the owner. He will give you a good deal. I can't sing his accolades enough. But he said he'd work with me and he'd buy that mower and we could, pay the bill that way. And that's one of those things where I just, I know that I step in sometimes and I say things sometimes that I probably shouldn't, and I get involved in other people's lives that most people wouldn't do, and sometimes it's kind of cringeworthy. And but I just, I'm one of those people. I want to help any way I can because I know when I need it, it's going to be there for me. Because it just happens that way. You put out good, you get back good. That's all there is to it. That's the best way to live your life. If you can help somebody, or those of y'all who don't know me, I know no strangers. I can talk to anybody at any educational level and have a good time about anything under the sun. And some things that you'd be surprised that I know about. Being a polymath gives me some advantages sometimes. Anyway, that's what I wanted to tell y'all today is be blessed, go out in the world and live your best life and try to help somebody else live their best life too. Because if you do, they're going to be there or somebody will be there to help you when you need it. So y'all have a great day and y'all live your life like that and y'all be blessed. Bye-bye.